Are you one of those people that's nostalgic for the 90s? I am to some degree, but I'm also really happy to be alive in 2017 where my internet's faster and I have access to a lot more movies. Back in the day, you really had to seek stuff out, and you went to the video store with your family or friends, and the only thing you had to go off of was the cover of the VHS tape or the description on the back, which was an art form in itself. But for the most part, you were taking a gamble every time, unless you knew the movie beforehand or you heard about it. But the weird thing about that era is that you would find movies all the time that you never heard of. You didn't know what critics thought of it, you didn't know how well it did at the box office, and then you take it home and really enjoy it. Meet the Applegates comes to mind. My stepmom's a monster. But one film that I fell in love with as a kid, and I watched at least 30 times on video, was My Boyfriend's Back, a 1993 film which was directed by I guess the character actor. He's a comedian. He's been in the Christopher Guest films. Bob Balaban, and it was written by Dean Lorey. Now, if you don't know the premise to this movie, it follows Johnny Dingle, your typical high school kid, who kind of has this Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson thing going on with the girl he grew up with, who's dating a jock guy at school, you know, a lot of those cliches, who's played by Matthew Fox, actually, the jock character, and Matthew McConaughey's in this movie, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's kind of like when Ben Affleck shows up in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's weird stuff. So Johnny Dingle, to win the heart of the girl that he so loves, stages a robbery at the store she works at. Unfortunately, there's an actual robbery happening that night, and Johnny gets shot. Because of his sheer love for her, he rises from the grave. Everyone in the town accepts this, especially his parents, who bring him home dead bodies and little kids to eat. And his parents steal the movie, by the way. So then Johnny actually does start to form a romance with her, and we get a romantic comedy. We also get something that tries to go for, I think, the satirical elements of Heathers and maybe the humor and tone of An American Werewolf in London, in particular during the theater sequence. There's also a doctor character that is the first one to tell Johnny he's dead, and then I think later on wants to sell off his body parts and cut him up for an experiment or something like that because it'll make him rich, which I guess makes sense. If somebody's a zombie, that's a pretty big deal. Anyway, why is this a good movie? Well, the cast. The cast is impeccable. Everyone's so good in this and really committed to it, especially the townsfolk and everyone in the school. It's one of those movies where all the supporting players are shockingly good. Like, why is Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie? And he's great in it because he's Philip Seymour Hoffman. Even the lead kid, Andrew Lowry, he didn't really have much of a career, but he's very charming. And I know this film has a cult following, and BuzzFeed's talked about it, and some other people on some websites and little things like that, but I still think it's overlooked. It only has, I think, 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it only has like a 5.4 on IMDb. And I don't really ever see it anywhere, and it's really worth watching. And if you're a fan of this kind of stuff, if you like B movies, this is a really good B movie. And it's not schlock, it's not like so bad it's good. It's really charming. It just doesn't have a lot of money behind it, and the cinematography isn't amazing, the sets and costumes and all that. But it has a sweet script. The story's really nice. Even the ending kind of has this defending your life thing about it, the Albert Brooks movie, even though it's not as good as that. But it's well paced. It's charming. It's got a lot of dark comedy in it that you wouldn't expect. It's got gross things about it that I really like she makes out with him and she bites his ear off. And he has to keep gluing his body parts back on. There's these dream sequences, fantasy sequences that are about the insecurity of a young man not wanting to perform badly in bed. A lot of subtext here too. Johnny's a zombie, right? He's worried about eating his girlfriend. He's very nervous about this. There's these sexual moments that he has, these fantasies about eating her. You can read into that if you will, but I think you get it. Not just that, his skin. People are, it's kind of like acne. He's going through changes. He's an outcast as a zombie. A teenage boy is so horny he would rise from the grave to get with a girl. Maybe even that you think you're in love with someone. It's that kind of that young love that you have because it's the first time you really feel a lot of those feelings. And that's what's really sweet about it. It settles for being a romantic comedy for a lot of it. It really doesn't have much of a struggle for Johnny until like the third act. But then it all comes back around. And just overall, yeah, just the idea that a guy tries to stage a robbery, gets killed, and then comes back to date some girl, and then has to fight from eating his friends and other people in the town, and eating his own girlfriend. Um, I just like that. It's really trying to be a parody of a lot of 80s teen comedies, and it doesn't totally succeed in that regard. It's not a super witty movie, and it's not as deep as it could be. But as just being a teen movie and also a zombie film, it's so much fun. And I think that it really holds up. Rewatching it, I was just taken aback by, how consistent it is, how it's still played as well as I remember as a kid. And it's almost like just going back, it really is. I mean, it's nostalgic, but it's really going back and being like, okay, I didn't just like this movie because I was a kid. Because there's a lot of movies when I was a kid I liked and I hate them now. This movie actually has something to it. It's got small ambitions, but it really pulls a lot off. There's these comic book transitions, editing thing that's kind of like the Warriors director's cut and Creep Show, and I think it really works in this movie. I love the music. I like how it's put together, and I would just recommend it. Like I said, if you're into this kind of thing, it's probably a love it or hate it kind of movie overall. But like I said, if you're a fan of genres like this and you like B movies, and maybe you're a fan of Frank Henenlotter, but you want something that's less screwed up, really, less challenging, and really, it's kind of like a lighthearted Frank Henenlotter movie, or a kid's version of a Henenlotter movie or something. It's not Basket Case, it's not Brain Damage, but it's still really good and it's worth seeking out. So underrated classic, if even it's a minor classic. My Boyfriend's Back is a 90s video store gem, and I think a lot of kids from that time remember this movie, and hopefully it gets a reappraisal in recent years. So like, comment, and subscribe, and please rewind your VHS tapes.